I'm Barnett, 22 years old, working 3 jobs while living at my parents' house in suburban Boston. My family has always had high expectations, especially my father. Despite everything I've sacrificed, nothing was ever enough. Last Tuesday, he erupted over dinner, his face turning crimson as he shouted those words, "I'll never forget. All you do is take. You've never given this family anything." If only he knew the truth about who was really paying for. Amanda's college. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to follow my journey from family scapegoat to finding my own worth. Growing up in the Sullivan household meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. My father Richard established himself as the unquestioned authority from my earliest memories. A successful insurance broker, with connections throughout New England, he measured everyone by their financial contributions and achievements. Standing 6'2" with broad shoulders and a perpetually stern expression, he commanded respect and fear in equal measure. "Barnett, look at your cousin Patrick. Already making 6 figures at 24, he'd say during family gatherings loud enough for everyone to hear. What's your plan to match that?" It didn't matter that Patrick's father had handed him a position at his law firm, or that I was working 60-hour weeks while studying. My mother Marie played her part perfectly. The supportive wife who never contradicted her husband in public. Slender with carefully maintained blonde hair, she excelled at maintaining appearances. When Dad's criticism went too far, she might place a gentle hand on his arm but never actually challenged him. "Your father just wants what's best for you," she'd whisper, after particularly brutal assessments of my shortcomings. Then there was my sister Amanda, 3 years younger, and somehow exempt from the expectations that weighed on me. With her perfect grades and cheerleader popularity, she became the family showcase. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a common refrain throughout my teenage years. Amanda wasn't malicious about her favored status, just oblivious to it. Only my grandmother Eleanor saw through the facade. During her monthly visits from Rhode Island, she'd slip me encouraging notes or squeeze my hand under the dinner table when Dad started in on one of his lectures. "You have more heart than the rest of them combined," she told me once when we were alone. That matters more than anything else, even if some people can't see it. Our house in Newton projected upper-middle-class success. 4 bedrooms, manicured lawn, and a 3-car garage. Inside those walls, however, emotional warmth was in short supply. Achievements weren't celebrated. They were expected. Mistakes weren't learning opportunities. They were personal failures reflecting poor character. After high school, most of my friends left for 4-year universities. I chose community college instead, staying at home to save money. This practical decision became another source of disappointment for my father. "Community college is for people who couldn't cut it anywhere else," he remarked when I received my acceptance letter. The fact that I was paying my own way didn't matter. The fact that I maintained a 3.9 GPA while working didn't register either. I took whatever jobs I could find. Morning shifts at a local bakery, afternoon hours at the campus library, and weekend work at a moving company. The money wasn't great, but it covered my tuition and gave me a small savings account. I was building something on my own terms, even if no one in my family noticed. Then during my second year, everything changed. I overheard a late-night argument between my parents about finances. Dad's insurance agency was struggling after losing several major clients. They were considering pulling Amanda from her private university due to the expense. That night I made a decision that would ultimately reshape our entire family dynamic. I had $8,000 saved, originally intended for transferring to a 4-year college. Instead, I walked into the bank the next morning and set up an automatic payment plan for Amanda's tuition. I told no one. Not Amanda, who continued her education without interruption. Not my parents, who mysteriously stopped receiving tuition bills but never questioned why. Not even Grandma Eleanor, the one person who might have understood. For nearly 2 years, I maintained this arrangement. I took on more hours, maxed out my credit cards during tight months, and postponed my own educational goals. Every semester, I'd receive the tuition statement, wince at the amount, and pay it anyway. Family takes care of family. That's what Mom always said, even if they didn't practice what they preached. All the while, my father continued his criticism of my lack of ambition and failure to launch. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I kept silent. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing I was contributing more than anyone realized. Perhaps I was hoping for a moment of revelation where they'd discover the truth and finally see me differently. That moment never came. Instead, things got worse. The evening that changed everything started like any other Tuesday dinner. Mom had prepared pot roast Dad's favorite, hoping to lighten his mood after a difficult day at work. Amanda was texting under the table, half listening to the conversation. I arrived last, having come straight from an 8-hour shift moving furniture for a corporate office. "You're late," Dad said as I slid into my chair, not bothering to look up from his plate. "Sorry, work ran long." The client added 3 more desks at the last minute. He made a dismissive noise in the back of his throat. "If you had a real job with a salary instead of hourly grunt work, you wouldn't have this problem." I bit my tongue and served myself some potatoes, too tired to engage. This was our normal, and I'd learned long ago that defending myself only prolonged the discomfort. Mom attempted to redirect. "Marie called today. Patrick just bought his first house." The familiar comparison game had begun. I nodded and chewed slowly, letting the conversation flow around me rather than through me. Patrick's house, Patrick's promotion, Patrick's girlfriend from a good family. The litany of my cousin's accomplishments served as implicit criticism of my own life choices. Then Amanda mentioned her upcoming semester abroad in Spain, an expensive program I knew she couldn't afford on her own. Neither could our parents, though they didn't know I was aware of their financial troubles. "It's going to be amazing," she gushed. "And it looks great on graduate school applications." "That's my girl, Dad," said, beaming with pride. Always thinking ahead. I should have stayed quiet. Should have nodded and smiled like always. But exhaustion and resentment had been building for years, and something in me snapped. "How exactly are you paying for that?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. The table went silent. Amanda looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean international programs cost extra, on top of regular tuition." Dad put down his fork, his expression darkening. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just curious about the financial logistics." "The financial logistics are none of your business," he said, voice rising. "Unlike some people at this table, your sister has earned these opportunities." My mother touched his arm gently. "Richard, please." But he was just getting started. 2 years of business struggles and wounded pride had created a pressure cooker, and I'd just provided the release valve. "No, Marie. He needs to hear this. While he's been playing around at community college and working dead-end jobs, his sister has been achieving something, making us proud." Playing around, I echoed, my own anger rising. "I work 60 hours a week. At jobs any teenager could do. No career path, no future. Just drifting while living under my roof, eating my food." "I pay rent," I reminded him. $500 monthly, that disappeared into his pocket. A token amount. Nowhere near what it costs to support you. My grandmother, who had been quietly eating until now, tried to intervene. "Richard, the boy works hard. He's saving for his future." "Stay out of this, Mom," he snapped, before turning back to me. "You know what your problem is, Barnett. You're entitled. You think the world owes you something." The unfairness of this accusation hit me like a physical blow. Entitled? Are you serious? Dead serious. All you do is take. You've never given this family anything. His voice had risen to a shout, face flushed with anger. I could have told him then. Could have thrown it in his face that I was the one keeping his precious daughter in college while his business floundered. That I'd sacrificed my own education and financial security for Amanda's benefit. That I'd been silently supporting the family he claimed I only took from. But looking at his contemptuous expression, I knew it wouldn't matter. He'd find a way to diminish it, to twist my sacrifice into something selfish or inadequate. "If you have any pride left," he continued, "you'd move out and stop being a burden." My mother gasped. "Richard." "I mean it, Marie. He's 22 years old. It's time he stood on his own 2 feet. The room spun slightly as his words sank in. I'd been kicked out of my home before, but never by my own father. Amanda stared at her plate, uncomfortable but silent. Mom looked torn between loyalty to her husband and concern for her son. Only Grandma spoke up. "This is outrageous, Richard. You'll regret this." I stood up slowly, napkin falling to the floor. "No, Grandma. He's right. It's time I left. Barnett, he doesn't mean it." My mother began, but I was already walking away. Upstairs, I packed methodically, taking only what I needed, Clothes, personal documents, a few photographs. The room I'd lived in for most of my life suddenly felt foreign, like a hotel room I was checking out of. I could hear raised voices downstairs, Grandma confronting Dad-Mom trying to mediate. Amanda appeared in my doorway as I zipped my duffel bag. "Are you really leaving?" "Looks that way." "But where will you go?" I shrugged. "I'll figure it out." Dad didn't mean it. He's just stressed about work. He meant it. I slung the bag over my shoulder. And maybe he's right. I walked past her down the stairs and through the living room where the adults were still arguing. Mom called my name, but I didn't stop. Dad stood with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. Only Grandma followed me out to my car, a used Honda with 200,000 miles on the odometer. "This isn't right," she said, tears in her eyes. "Call me tomorrow, promise." I nodded, kissed her cheek, and got behind the wheel. In the rearview mirror, I watched my childhood home grow smaller until I turned the corner and it disappeared completely. I had $78 in my checking account, maxed out credit cards, and rent due on my sister's tuition payment in 2 weeks. But driving away in the cool evening air, windows down and familiar streets falling behind me, I felt something unexpected: relief. The Lakeside Motel charged $49 per night, leaving me with just enough for a fast food dinner and breakfast. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and cigarettes, but it had a bed and shower. Sitting on the faded comforter, I finally allowed myself to process what had happened. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Calls from Mom, texts from Amanda, even one voicemail from Grandma Eleanor checking that I was safe. I responded only to her, a brief message confirming I had a place to stay for the night. It wasn't entirely true, but I didn't want her worrying. Around midnight, I called Marcus, my friend since middle school, and one of the few people who understood my family situation. They did what he said after I explained. "Man, that's messed up." "Yeah, well, it was coming sooner or later." "Where are you now?" "Some motel off Route 9. Pack your stuff. You're staying with me until you figure things out." Marcus lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with his girlfriend Leah. Their spare room was small, mostly storage, but they cleared enough space for an air mattress. "Stay as long as you need," Leah offered, squeezing my shoulder sympathetically. The next morning, I began searching for better job opportunities. My current positions paid just enough to cover expenses, but not enough to afford an apartment in Boston's expensive rental market. I needed something with growth potential, something that could become a career. After a week of applications and networking, I landed an interview at Meridian Technologies, a growing IT company in Cambridge. Despite having no formal experience in the field, my self-taught coding skills and community college coursework impressed the hiring manager. They offered me an entry-level position with a salary that exceeded all 3 of my current jobs combined. "This is just the beginning, Derek," my new supervisor explained during orientation. "Show initiative and you can move up quickly here." For the first time, I felt like someone was investing in my potential rather than focusing on my limitations. I gave notice at my other jobs and threw myself into learning everything I could about my new position. With steady income secured, I found a studio apartment in Somerville. It was small and needed updates, but it was mine, the first place I'd ever lived independently. I bought secondhand furniture, learned to cook simple meals, and established routines that didn't revolve around my family's expectations. Through all these changes, I continued making Amanda's tuition payments. Despite the hurt and anger, I couldn't bring myself to punish my sister for my father's actions. She'd send occasional texts checking in, unaware of my financial support or the true reasons behind my departure. "Dad's calmed down," she wrote 3 weeks after I left. "You should come for Sunday dinner." I didn't respond. The thought of sitting at that table again, pretending everything was normal, made my stomach turn. Instead, I blocked my father's number and limited communication with my mother to brief factual exchanges. Only Grandma Eleanor maintained regular contact. She'd call weekly, giving me space to talk or just listening when I needed it. "Your father is too proud to admit he was wrong," she told me during one conversation. "But he's starting to realize what he lost." I doubted that very much. In his mind, I was probably still the disappointing son who couldn't measure up. The fact that I was thriving independently would matter less than the fact that I defied his authority by leaving. About a month into my new life, I met Sophia at a coffee shop near my apartment. Dark-haired with an easy laugh, she worked as a graphic designer and lived in the building next to mine. Our first date stretched from dinner to late-night conversation on a harbor walk. By our third meeting, I knew this was something significant. "You never talk about your family," she observed one evening, as we cooked dinner in my small kitchen. "Not much to say. We're not close. None of them. Parents. Siblings. My grandmother. She's amazing. The rest. It's complicated." Sophia didn't push, allowing me to share pieces of my story at my own pace. Her family was close-knit and supportive, the kind that gathered for Sunday dinners and actually enjoyed each other's company. Through her, I began to understand what healthy family dynamics could look like. My new job provided unexpected opportunities. Within 2 months, Derek moved me to a specialized project team working on client security systems. "You have good instincts," he said during my first performance review. "Keep this up, and we'll be discussing advancement by year's end." For once, my hard work was being recognized and rewarded. The constant criticism I'd grown accustomed to at home was replaced by constructive feedback and encouragement. I found myself becoming more confident, more willing to voice opinions and take initiatives. Life wasn't perfect. My apartment needed repairs I couldn't afford yet. Some nights, memories of my father's words would keep me awake, replaying in an endless loop. I missed my grandmother's hugs and even occasionally my mother's cooking. But for the first time, I was living on my terms, building something that couldn't be diminished by comparison to someone else's achievements. Then, exactly 5 weeks after I walked out of my parents' house, everything changed again. My phone rang on a Friday evening as I was leaving work. Amanda's name flashed on the screen, the first direct call since I'd left. Something in me knew this wasn't a casual check-in. I almost didn't answer. Almost sent it to voicemail like I had with my parents' calls. But concern for my sister overrode the boundary I'd established. "Hello?" Her voice came through broken with sobs. "Barnett, why did the tuition payment stop?" Amanda's question hung in the air between us, vibrating with implications she couldn't possibly understand. In that moment, I faced a choice: continue protecting her from the truth, or finally let the reality of our family situation come to light. "What are you talking about?" I asked, buying time to organize my thoughts. "The university financial office called me in today," she explained, her voice steadying slightly. "They said my tuition hasn't been paid for the upcoming semester, and I'm at risk of being withdrawn from classes." "Did you talk to Mom and Dad?" "Yes," Dad said. "They've never paid my tuition directly. They thought it was my scholarship covering everything, but the scholarship only covers partial tuition." The confusion in her voice was genuine. For nearly 2 years, she'd been operating under false assumptions about her education funding. Our parents had either been equally deceived or more likely had chosen to accept the mysterious disappearance of tuition bills without questioning the source. So if it wasn't them, and it wasn't entirely the scholarship who's been paying, her question contained its own answer, realization dawning in her voice. "Barnett, was it you?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I'd expected. Part of me wanted to confess everything, to lay bare the sacrifices I'd made while being labeled the family failure. Another part, hardened by recent events, wanted her to experience the same uncertainty I'd lived with. "Thought I never gave this family anything," I texted back instead of speaking, then ended the call. It was petty, perhaps, using Dad's exact words against them, but after years of diminishment and dismissal followed by being thrown out of my own home, the opportunity for this small revenge proved irresistible. I blocked Amanda's number immediately afterward, extending the communication blackout to include my entire immediate family. Only Grandma Eleanor remained an open channel, and through her, I received updates on the chaos unfolding in my absence. "Your father had to take out an emergency loan," she reported during our weekly call. "Your mother's worried sick about making mortgage payments." I listened without commenting, emotions warring inside me. Satisfaction that my absence was finally being felt. Guilt that my sister's education hung in the balance. Anger that it had taken financial hardship for my contribution to become a parent. According to Grandma, my parents had been forced to reveal their business struggles to Amanda, who now understood why her tuition had become an issue. She'd taken a part-time waitressing job and applied for additional student loans, but the process was slow and the university demanded immediate payment. Your father's pride is taking a beating, Grandma, continued with a touch of satisfaction in her voice. Several clients have left the agency this month. They're talking about putting the house on the market. The home I'd grown up in the showcase of family success might soon belong to strangers. My mother, who had always prioritized appearances, would face the community knowing their financial facade had crumbled. My father would lose the physical manifestation of his authority and accomplishment. How's Amanda handling everything, I asked, concern for my sister overriding other emotions. Struggling, but managing. She's had to drop her study abroad plans. Between classes and work, she barely sleeps. Grandma paused significantly. She misses you. I changed the subject, unwilling to soften just yet. The truth was, I missed her too. Despite everything, Amanda hadn't been responsible for my father's behavior or my mother's enabling. She'd been as much a product of the family dynamic as I had, just positioned differently within it. At work, my career continued its upward trajectory. Derek promoted me to team lead on a major client project, bringing additional responsibility and another salary increase. My colleagues respected my technical skills and work ethic, creating professional relationships unlike anything I'd experienced before. You should apply for the manager track program, Derek suggested during a project review. You've got the right mindset for leadership. My personal life expanded too. Sophia introduced me to her friends, bringing me into a social circle where people genuinely enjoyed each other's company without constant competition. We explored Boston together on weekends, discovering parts of my hometown I'd never appreciated before. You're different lately, Sophia observed one evening as we walked along the Charles River. More relaxed. Am I? Definitely. When we first met, you seemed guarded, like you were waiting for something bad to happen. She was right. Growing up with my father's unpredictable criticism had taught me to always be on alert to anticipate attacks before they came. That hypervigilance had become so normal I hadn't recognized it until it began to fade. 3 months after leaving home, I moved to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood. Sophia helped me decorate, adding color and personality to spaces I would have left utilitarian. A home should reflect who you are, she insisted, hanging artwork and arranging plants. The contrast between my improving circumstances and my family's decline created complicated emotions. Through Grandma's updates, I learned that my parents had indeed listed their house, accepting an offer well below asking price due to urgent financial needs. My father's business had lost several major accounts, forcing him to downsize his office and let go of staff. Your mother's having anxiety attacks, Grandma reported. The doctor prescribed medication, but she hates taking it, says it makes her feel foggy. Amanda had moved to cheaper campus housing and taken on additional work hours, sacrificing study time to make ends meet. Her grades were suffering, putting her scholarship at risk. The carefully constructed future my parents had planned for her was unraveling thread by thread. I should have felt vindicated. Here was proof that my contributions had been essential, that far from being a burden, I had been a crucial support. Yet satisfaction mingled with an unexpected sadness. This broken family was still my family. Their pain, however deserved, still affected me. Sophia noticed my distraction after these calls with Grandma. Maybe you should reach out to them, she suggested. Not to fix everything, but just to check in. They haven't tried to contact me in weeks, I pointed out. Pride works both ways, Barnett. She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't ready. The wound was still too fresh, the memory of my father's contemptuous face too vivid. I needed more time and distance before considering any form of reconciliation. Then fate intervened in the form of a chance encounter that forced the issue sooner than I'd planned. 6 months after walking out of my childhood home, I barely recognized my own life. My position at Meridian Technologies had evolved into a leadership role, managing a team of 5 developers. My apartment, while still modest, contained furniture I'd chosen and paid for myself. My relationship with Sophia had deepened into something I'd never experienced before: mutual respect paired with genuine affection. We should take a weekend trip to Vermont next month, she suggested one evening as we finished dinner at my place. There's this great little town with amazing fall foliage. Making plans more than a few days ahead still felt strange after years of living reactively, but I was learning to embrace the stability my new life offered. Let's do it. I can request the time off tomorrow. This casual confidence, The certainty that I could make decisions without waiting for criticism or rejection represented perhaps the most significant change. I'd begun pursuing additional certifications related to cybersecurity investing in my professional development without seeking anyone's approval. The company was even offering to cover part of my tuition when I eventually returned to complete my bachelor's degree. Derek mentioned the possibility of sending you to the national conference in Chicago, Sophia said, clearing our plates. That's a big deal. He mentioned it to me too. Nothing definite yet. Still, the fact that you're being considered after less than a year shows how much they value you. She was right. After a lifetime of being told I wasn't measuring up, the recognition felt almost disorienting. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop for someone to point out all the ways I was falling short, but that moment never came. Meanwhile, through Grandma Eleanor's regular updates, I tracked my family's continuing struggles. My parents had completed the sale of our family home and moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a less prestigious neighborhood. The insurance agency had downsized again, with my father taking on additional responsibilities himself rather than paying staff. Richard looks 10 years older, Grandma reported during our weekly call. Marie is trying to find work, but it's been so long since she's been employed that her resume doesn't get much attention. What about Amanda? I always asked about my sister, though I maintained the communication blackout. Working too much and studying too little. She's on academic probation this semester. If her grades don't improve, she could lose what's left of her scholarship. The contrast between my rising trajectory and my family's decline created a strange emotional dissonance. I took no pleasure in their struggles, yet couldn't deny a certain vindication. The same father who had dismissed my contributions was now facing the consequences of their absence. My relationship with Sophia began showing signs of strain as my family situation remained unresolved. You can't just pretend they don't exist forever, she argued during one of our increasingly frequent discussions about the topic. I'm not pretending anything. I'm establishing boundaries with people who treated me poorly. Boundaries are healthy. Complete disconnection is different. You don't understand what it was like, I insisted. You grew up with parents who supported you, which is exactly why I know relationships can be better than what you experienced. But they don't improve through silence. These conversations always ended in stalemate. Sophia couldn't fully comprehend the depth of hurt I carried, and I resisted her well-intentioned but simplistic suggestions for reconciliation. The impasse created a subtle distance between us, a small but growing gap neither of us knew how to bridge. 7 months after leaving home, I received my first direct news about my family from someone other than Grandma. A former neighbor spotted me at a coffee shop and stopped to chat. Your folks' place sold quick, he mentioned casually. Nice young family moved in. 2 kids, I think. I nodded non-committally. Your dad's not looking too good these days. Saw him at the grocery store last week. Lost weight. Didn't even say hello, which isn't like him. The image was difficult to reconcile with the commanding presence I remembered. Richard Sullivan, reduced and withdrawn, no longer the neighborhood success story. And your sister dropped out, right? That's what I heard anyway. This was news. Dropped out, you mean from college? That's the rumor. Shame after all that work to get into a good school. I thanked him for the update and left quickly, mind racing. Had Amanda actually left university, Grandma hadn't mentioned this development, which seemed significant enough to share. Unless she didn't know either. That evening I broke my own rule and called Grandma instead of waiting for her regular check-in. Is it true Amanda dropped out? I asked without preamble. A long pause followed. She's taking a semester off, Grandma finally answered. To work full-time and save money. The plan is to return in spring. Why didn't you tell me? She asked me not to. Said you had your own life now and didn't need to worry about family problems. The words stung in their accuracy. Hadn't I been trying to establish exactly that separation? Yet somehow hearing that Amanda had accepted and formalized the distance between us felt unexpectedly painful. Where is she working? 2 jobs. Waitressing mornings at a diner and retail evenings at the mall. Living with a friend to save on housing. The parallels to my own previous situation weren't lost on me. Amanda was now experiencing the grueling schedule and limited options I'd lived with for years. The difference was that I'd chosen that path while supporting her education. She'd been forced into it by circumstances beyond her control. Your father's business is barely hanging on, Grandma continued, sensing my receptiveness to more family information. One more major client cancellation could be the end. Your mother's anxiety has gotten worse. The doctor recommended therapy, but they can't afford it right now. For the first time since leaving, I felt a complicated mix of emotions that couldn't be reduced to either satisfaction or guilt. My family was genuinely struggling, not just financially, but emotionally and physically. The system I'd helped maintain through my unacknowledged support had collapsed in my absence. That night, I found myself looking through old family photos stored on my laptop. Holiday gatherings, vacations, snapshots, school events, moments when we'd appeared to be the perfect American family. Behind each smile lay a complex reality I was only now beginning to fully understand. The next morning, Sophia and I had our most serious argument yet about my family situation. At some point, this stops being about them and starts being about you, she insisted over breakfast. Holding on to this anger is hurting you more than them. That's easy to say when you haven't lived it. I know I haven't, but I see what it's doing to you, Barnett. You've built this amazing new life, but you can't fully enjoy it because you're still looking back, still keeping score. Her words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Despite my professional success and personal growth, part of me remained tethered to the past, to the need for recognition that had never come. The argument ended unresolved, with Sophia leaving for work earlier than usual and me sitting alone in my apartment contemplating choices I'd been avoiding for months. Was maintaining complete separation from my family serving me anymore? Or had a boundary necessary for initial healing calcified into something rigid and limiting? I had no answers, only questions that followed me through the workday and into the evening. When I returned home, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in months, scrolling through my blocked contacts list and hovering over Amanda's name. Before I could decide whether to unblock her, my phone rang with an unknown number. Something told me to answer rather than let it go to voicemail, as I typically did with unfamiliar calls. Hello. Barnett, it's Amanda. I'm using my friend's phone. The voice I'd grown up with now sounding older and more tired than I remembered. In that moment, the carefully constructed wall between my past and present began to crack. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, she continued, when I didn't immediately respond. But I really need to see you. Please. Fate had made the decision I'd been avoiding. When and where? We agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our locations, neutral territory for what promised to be a difficult conversation. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with some privacy from other patrons. Through the window, I watched Amanda approach, nearly walking past the entrance before doubling back. She looked different, thinner with shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully conceal. Her clothing was simpler than the fashionable outfits she'd favored before, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail rather than the careful styling she'd once prioritized. When she spotted me, her expression cycled rapidly through nervousness, relief, and something like shame. I stood as she approached, unsure of the appropriate greeting after months of silence. She solved the dilemma by hugging me tightly, an unexpected gesture that momentarily froze me before I returned it awkwardly. You look good, she said, taking the seat across from me. Really good. Thanks. You seem. I searched for a kind way to describe her obvious exhaustion. Like a mess. She attempted a laugh. It's okay. I know. The barista arrived to take our orders, creating a brief respite from the tension. Once she left, we faced each other across the small table, months of unspoken history between us. I wasn't sure you'd come, Amanda began. I wasn't sure either, until I agreed. She nodded, fiddling with a sugar packet. I don't even know where to start. How about with why you wanted to meet? She took a deep breath. Everything's fallen apart, Barnett. Dad's business is failing. Mom's barely functioning. We had to sell the house. And her voice caught. I had to leave school. I heard. From who? Grandma. And a former neighbor. Amanda nodded slowly. Word travels fast in the old neighborhood. Everyone loves watching the mighty fall. The bitterness in her voice sounded strange, coming from my perpetually optimistic sister. This new Amanda had edges I didn't recognize. Is it true you were the one paying my tuition? she asked abruptly. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I'd expected. Yes. For how long? Almost 2 years. Since Dad's business started struggling. She closed her eyes, briefly absorbing this information. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered? Of course it would have mattered, I would have. She trailed off, perhaps realizing there was no simple answer to what she would have done differently. Our drinks arrived, creating another momentary pause in the conversation. I watched Amanda add cream to her coffee with shaking hands. Why did you stop the payments? She finally asked. Was it because of what Dad said that night? Partly. Being told I never gave anything to the family while secretly funding your education was ironic. I had no idea, Barnett. None of us did. That was the point. Dad's pride wouldn't have allowed him to accept my help if he'd known. She stared into her coffee. But why keep it secret from me? Because you would have told them, or refused to accept it. You don't know that. Don't I? You've never gone against them, Amanda. Ever. Her cheeks flushed with anger or embarrassment, possibly both. That's not fair, isn't it? When Dad was tearing into me at dinner, did you say anything when he told me to leave? Did you object? I was shocked. Everyone was. Grandma wasn't too shocked to speak up. Amanda fell silent, acknowledging the truth of this observation. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I've had a lot of time to think about that night, about a lot of things. Working 2 jobs while trying to keep up with classes showed me what you'd been doing for years. Welcome to my world. I know that now. I didn't then. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Barnett, for not seeing what was happening, for accepting the family narrative about you without question. The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, caught me off guard. For years I'd imagined confrontations with my family, but they always featured me delivering cutting truths to stunned listeners. I hadn't prepared for genuine remorse. Mom and Dad need to hear this too, Amanda continued. They need to understand what you did for us, for me. They won't listen. They might now. Things are different. They're different. I laughed skeptically. People don't change that fundamentally, Amanda. Losing everything can change people, and they've lost almost everything. She reached across the table, tentatively touching my hand. Just meet with them, one time. If it's a disaster, you never have to see any of us again. Part of me wanted to refuse to protect the new life I'd built from the toxic dynamics of the past. But another part, perhaps the part that had secretly paid Amanda's tuition, despite everything, couldn't completely sever the connection to my family. One meeting I agreed reluctantly. Neutral location, and Grandma has to be there. Amanda nodded quickly. Absolutely. Whatever you want. We arranged to meet that weekend at a restaurant downtown, far from both our old neighborhood and my new apartment. As we prepared to leave, Amanda hesitated. There's something else you should know, she said. Dad's not well. Physically, I mean. The doctor thinks it might be stress-related, but he's lost a lot of weight and has these dizzy spells. I nodded, unsure how to respond. The father in my memory was robust and intimidating, a force of nature rather than a vulnerable human being. The image of him weakened was difficult to reconcile with my emotional reality. Saturday at 1, I confirmed, standing to leave. Don't be late. The days before the family meeting passed with excruciating slowness. I told Sophia about the planned reunion, earning her enthusiastic support. This is a huge step, she said, squeezing my hand. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you for trying. At work, I found myself distracted, running through potential scenarios in my mind. Would my father be hostile, dismissive? Would he acknowledge what I'd done for Amanda, or find a way to minimize it? Would my mother speak up or default to her peacekeeping role? Saturday arrived, clear and cool, perfect early autumn weather that belied the emotional storm I anticipated. I dressed carefully in business casual attire, presentable but not trying too hard. Sophia offered to accompany me for moral support, but this was something I needed to do alone. The restaurant was moderately busy when I arrived exactly at 1. Amanda had chosen well, upscale enough to discourage scenes but not so fancy as to strain anyone's finances. I spotted them immediately at a corner table, my parents Amanda and Grandma Eleanor. They saw me at the same moment. Grandma smiled warmly. Amanda waved tentatively. My mother's hand went to her throat in a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. And my father. He looked like a diminished version of himself, shirt collar loose around a neck that had grown thinner, face lined in ways I didn't recall. You came, Amanda said, unnecessarily as I reached the table. I said I would. Grandma Eleanor stood to hug me properly. It's good to see you in person, dear. My mother half rose uncertain of her welcome. Barnett. I nodded to her, then faced my father, who remained seated, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Dad. The server's arrival created a welcome distraction as everyone ordered drinks. When she departed, an uncomfortable silence descended. Amanda looked between our parents and me, clearly expecting someone to begin. Finally, Grandma took charge. We're here because this family has some important truths to acknowledge, she stated firmly. Starting with what Barnett did for Amanda's education. My father's head came up at this, eyes meeting mine briefly before sliding away. Amanda told us, he said, voice rougher than I remembered, about the tuition payments. And Grandma prompted when he didn't continue. And we had no idea, my mother interjected. All this time we thought the bills had stopped because of increased scholarship funding. You never questioned it, I asked. When thousands of dollars in expenses suddenly disappeared, we were relieved, she admitted. The business was struggling. We didn't want to look too closely at good fortune. It wasn't fortune, I said. It was me working 3 jobs while taking classes. It was me maxing out credit cards and postponing my own education. My father cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us? The question seemed so fundamentally obtuse that I nearly laughed. Would you have accepted my help? Or would you have seen it as another opportunity to tell me how I was doing it wrong, how I should be focusing on my own future instead? He had no answer, confirming my assessment. I have proof, by the way. I continued, removing a folder from my bag. Copies of all the payments. Nearly $40,000 over 2 years. I placed the documentation on the table. My mother reached for it with trembling hands, flipping through statements and receipts that chronicled my secret support. I had no idea, Amanda said softly, looking at the figures. This is more than I make in a year at both my jobs combined. And all while being told I never contributed anything to the family, I added, unable to keep the edge from my voice, while being kicked out of my home for being a burden. My father flinched visibly at this. For the first time, I saw something I'd never witnessed before, shame in his expression. I was wrong, he said, the words clearly difficult for him, about many things. Coming from a man who had never admitted error in my lifetime, this simple acknowledgement carried significant weight. My mother began to cry silently, mascara tracing dark lines down her cheeks. The business is failing, my father continued, probably beyond saving at this point. The house is gone. Your mother's having anxiety attacks. Amanda had to leave school. He looked up, meeting my eyes fully. Everything fell apart when you left. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implications. I'd been the foundation they hadn't recognized, the support beam they'd taken for granted, until its removal caused the collapse of the entire structure. I'm sorry for what I said that night, he added, and for a lot of things over the years. The apology I'd never expected to hear, delivered in a public restaurant, while my once imposing father looked physically diminished and emotionally raw. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like witnessing the end of something, the final collapse of the family mythology we'd all participated in creating and maintaining. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he clarified. Just for you to know that I recognize what you did, what you were doing all along. Grandma reached over to squeeze my hand supportively. Amanda watched anxiously, clearly hoping for reconciliation. My mother continued to cry silently, years of suppressed emotions finally finding release. In that moment, I realized that true victory wasn't in making them acknowledge my worth. It was in having discovered that worth for myself, independent of their recognition or approval. Where do we go from here? Amanda asked, voicing the question, hanging unspoken over the table. I had no simple answer. The damage of years couldn't be repaired in a single conversation. Trust once broken requires time and consistent effort to rebuild. But perhaps acknowledging the truth was a necessary first step. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But this is a start. The months following our restaurant confrontation brought gradual, tentative changes to my family relationships. We didn't immediately return to regular contact or pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, we established new boundaries and expectations, rebuilding connections from the foundation up rather than trying to repair the flawed structure that had collapsed. I met with my father separately to discuss his business situation. Years of working multiple jobs had taught me financial management skills he'd never acknowledged. The agency isn't salvageable in its current form, I told him after reviewing his books, but there are parts worth saving. Pride might once have prevented him from accepting my analysis, but desperation made him receptive. Together, we developed a plan to downsize to a specialized insurance niche rather than continuing the generalized approach that had become unsustainable in the changing market. I should have listened to you years ago when you suggested digital marketing, he admitted during one of our strategy sessions. You saw where things were heading before I did. These acknowledgments, unthinkable in our previous relationship, came more frequently as we worked together. Not because he had fundamentally changed, but because circumstances had forced him to see me differently. The son he had dismissed as underachieving now represented his best hope for professional survival. My mother and I reconnected more slowly. Her enabling role in the family dynamic had caused different but equally significant damage to our relationship. I should have defended you, she acknowledged during a careful lunch meeting. I knew your father was too hard on you, but I was afraid of making things worse. By becoming a target yourself, I suggested understanding her position more clearly as an adult than I had as a child. She nodded, tears forming. It was cowardly. It was survival. But it taught me the wrong lessons about my worth. Her therapy, which they had finally prioritized despite financial constraints, was helping her recognize these patterns. I don't want to be that person anymore, she told me, too afraid to stand up for what's right. With Amanda, reconciliation came more naturally. As the family member who had benefited most directly from my support while being least responsible for the toxic dynamics, she occupied a unique position. We began meeting regularly for coffee, rebuilding the sibling relationship that had been overshadowed by parental expectations and favoritism. I'm going back to school next semester, she informed me during one of these meetings. Part-time while continuing to work. That's great. Community college. She nodded. Following your example, finally. It makes more financial sense. I didn't offer to resume paying her tuition. That chapter had closed, and we both understood that true support meant encouraging independence rather than creating dependency. Instead, I helped her research scholarship opportunities and develop a sustainable educational plan. My relationship with Sophia became another casualty of the family reconciliation process. The emotional energy required to navigate these complex dynamics left little for nurturing our romance. You're not fully present anymore, she observed one evening after I returned from a strategy session with my father. It's temporary, I assured her, just until things stabilize. But we both recognized the growing distance. The woman who had encouraged me to reconnect with my family ultimately lost me to the complexity of that reconnection. Our breakup, while painful, was mutually respectful, acknowledging that right person, wrong timing sometimes applies even to compatible partners. Grandma Eleanor remained my steadfast supporter throughout this transition period. You're doing the impossible, she told me during one of our regular phone calls. Changing family patterns that have existed for generations. Her health had begun to decline, making her insights even more precious. I prioritized visiting her regularly, sometimes bringing my parents along for intergenerational healing conversations that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. 6 months after our restaurant confrontation, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. With my father's business restructuring underway and showing promising early results, I invested some of my savings as a minority partner in the agency. Are you sure about this? Derek asked, when I explained why I was reducing my hours at Meridian Technologies. After everything you've told me about your family dynamics, it's different now, I explained. We have clear boundaries and expectations, written agreements, and I'm not giving up my career here, just creating more balance. The truth was more complex than I could easily articulate. By becoming a business partner rather than a son, seeking approval, I had fundamentally altered the power dynamic with my father. Our relationship now had defined parameters and mutual respect that had never existed in our personal connection. My mother marveled at the transformation. "You two actually listen to each other now," she observed after witnessing a productive business discussion. "We have to," I explained. "The business depends on it." This structure created safety that allowed for gradual personal healing alongside professional collaboration. We weren't trying to erase the past or pretend the hurt hadn't happened. Instead, we were building something new that acknowledged our history while not being defined by it. The experience taught me profound lessons about family self-worth and the complex nature of healing. First, that financial support without emotional recognition creates unsustainable dynamics. My secret tuition payments had enabled our family's dysfunction rather than addressing its root causes. Second, that sometimes walking away is necessary for everyone's growth. My departure, while painful, created the crisis that forced long overdue changes in our family system. Third, that healing doesn't mean forgetting or pretending harm didn't occur. It means establishing new patterns with appropriate boundaries and expectations. Fourth, that forgiveness is a process rather than an event. Some days I still felt anger over past treatment. Other days I experienced genuine appreciation for our evolving relationships. Both reactions were valid parts of the healing journey. Finally, that true self-worth comes from within rather than external validation. The recognition I'd desperately sought from my family ultimately mattered less than the confidence I'd built through my own achievements. 1 year after leaving my childhood home, I moved into a new apartment, smaller than my previous place but in a neighborhood I preferred. The downsizing reflected my changed financial priorities after investing in the family business, but represented growth rather than sacrifice. Amanda helped me unpack our conversation, flowing more easily than it had in years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked as we arranged books on shelves, walking out that night. I considered the question carefully. It was necessary, for all of us. Even with everything that happened afterward, the struggle, the pain, especially because of those things, we were never going to change without a crisis forcing us to see the truth. She nodded thoughtfully. "I used to think family meant staying together no matter what. Now I understand it sometimes means separating to find healthier ways of connecting." This insight from the sister who had once embodied our family's avoidance patterns demonstrated how far we had all come, not to perfect relationships or complete healing, but to greater awareness and intentionality in how we treated each other. As we finished arranging my new home, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the devastating dinner where my contributions had been dismissed to the gradual rebuilding of relationships on more authentic terms, from working multiple jobs in desperate secrecy to partnering in business with clear agreements and boundaries, from seeking validation from others to finding it within myself. The path hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. The work of maintaining healthier dynamics would continue indefinitely, requiring vigilance and commitment from all of us. But standing in my new space, surrounded by possessions I had chosen and earned, I felt something that had eluded me throughout my earlier life: peace. Not the peace of perfect resolution or fairy tale endings, but the deeper peace that comes from living authentically and setting boundaries that protect your self-respect. Sometimes I've learned the most powerful thing you can do in a toxic situation is simply walk away, not in anger or revenge, but in the quiet certainty that you deserve better. That action alone can create the possibility for genuine change that staying would have prevented. Have you ever had to walk away from someone or something important to finally be valued? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding self-worth through difficult family situations. Remember that your value isn't determined by others' recognition of it. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to see our true worth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand firm in your own value, even when it means standing alone.